have to do the thing that's burning on my heart, which is something that happened about 25 minutes ago, which is, you know, running a little late and, you know, gonna go the route we usually take and detour. Happens to some other people too. So, you know, and all of the stuff that I know up here, and all the stuff that comes out of here, still, yet, I allow the detour to get me all flustered, and get me in knots, and get me fretting. I like that word, fretting. Fretting. I was fretting a lot, you know, and then I take it out on the people that I love the most, you know. I don't know if anybody else does that, but I do that. And so today's message is about forgiveness and the concept of it, and the notion of it, and the radicalness of it, and the extremeness of it. And I want to put it in a metaphysical, mystical, and interfaith kind of perspective, this notion of forgiveness. So I really loved, of course, hearing Kevin in the beginning talking about forgiving yourself. Because when I mess up, you know, I want forgiveness right away from somebody else. I want them to forgive me immediately. Please, I'm so sorry. But you know, I'm sorry sometimes doesn't cut it after a while. You know, it's about change. We really want to change our behavior. But still, it's good to have awareness that you want to make something right, that you take responsibility for what you've done, right? But here's then what happens to me, and I don't know if this is the, you know, the Catholic vasana or what it is, but and vasana is a Sanskrit term in Hindu, which just means kind of like a tendency. But what I do is I beat myself up then, you know. So I have a need then to confess. So I'm confessing, you know, that I have it here. I got it here. I understand these concepts, but sometimes practicing them are difficult. So it makes me think about Jesus. It makes me think about Jesus and the betrayal and the crucifixion. And when you think about Master Jesus and everything that he is, and everything historically, just like, let's just take the historical piece of it. Here he is, the ultimate worst case scenario up on the cross. And what he says is a message of forgiveness. I mean, that's just like that, and have a nice day, see you, you know, like that's the message, right? It's like, wow, oh my God, you're gonna be kidding me, right? That's like the worst thing one could think of. And yet, the message that he wants to leave us with is forgive them, for they know not what they do, he says. They know not what they do. So, talk a little bit about that in a minute, but what it makes me also think about is a Hindu story, the story of Durvasa. And I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit. I'm gonna give it a G rating, the G story, because Chris gets really, really bent out of shape when I go into the R version of that story. So I won't. But just to know that Durvasa was this sage that came to visit Krishna. Now everybody probably knows Krishna. Krishna is a god in the Hindu tradition, one of the avatars. And the sage comes to visit, and nobody wanted the sage because every time the sage would come to visit, he could never be pleased enough. You could never please him enough, no matter what you tried to do. Give him the best meal, it didn't matter. Give him the best bedding, it didn't matter. So everybody was reluctant to invite this guy to their bed and breakfast kind of thing. But Krishna invited. He said, you know, please come. So Durvasa comes, and sure enough, just as one would think, Durvasa, who is this like, he's like evil. He's so mean. He's so bitter. He's so discontent. Like nothing can make him happy, nothing. And so he asks Krishna to make this special pudding, and Krishna makes it. And it takes a long time, and it's beautiful, and it's delicious, and he gives it to Durvasa, and Durvasa says, now I want you to smear it all over yourself. I know, it's like, because he's God. I mean, really, he is. He's God, right? Bottom line is that Krishna continues to forgive and allow and accept, and you go, wait a second, stop. What are you trying to tell me? To be like a welcome mat? You're trying to tell me to be like, just let people walk all over me? Let people injure me? Is that what you're telling me? We got to go beyond that. There's a mystical explanation here. So fast forward the story. Ultimately, at the end of the story, Krishna has taken a lot of abuse from Durvasa. And it is at that moment that Durvasa takes off his mask. See, he was wearing a costume, he was wearing a mask, and he actually was Shiva. And when Krishna and Shiva go to hug each other, Krishna becomes Vishnu. Now, this is a long story, and it gets into Hindu mythology and all of that, but all you need to know is that it's God hugging God. God hugging God. So, how does this apply to us? What does all of this mean? Well, it's radical. It's an extreme concept of forgiveness, but it's going beyond appearances. Because with Durvasa, it was appearing as though he was this mean villain, and it appears as if Krishna is this Hindu god, right? Back at the ranch, the two of them are really ultimately source. Same thing with us. See, so there's no Grace and Chris, Kevin, Grace. I know you think that. I know I think that. And I get tricked into thinking that all the time. I get tricked into names and forms. But this body, this mind, this intellect, this personality, this is all an illusion. Metaphysically speaking, mystically speaking, we are beyond that. We are spirit. So if we believe that, how many of you do? I'm just curious. How many of you really believe that? Some of the jury's still out, or you don't want to vote.
Believe
it's
that
okay.
we are. Believe what? That we're spirit?
Believe that we're spirit. That we're not really physical. That we operate in a physical realm, but that we are spiritual beings. Not the other way around. All right, we'll vote again. How many of you think that's true? So if you think that's true, and I do, then why do I have a tantrum when there's a detour and I'm lost on 12th Street and every sign says dead end, do not enter, can't go this way, you're gonna be late. And then my reaction, which is not spiritual in nature at all. So if I'm really spirit, and I believe that, and I'm really source energy, then why is it that when I go on Facebook, and tell me if any of you feel this way, I go on Facebook right now. I use Facebook a lot for marketing purposes to get the word out, about stuff. But I go on Facebook and I get sometimes in knots. I look at other people's posting and they're all loving and caring and they're posting like divine messages and inspirational messages, and I feel like, A, I don't feel that way right now, right? B, I feel like I'm comparing myself to them. Oh, they feel like that and I don't feel like that, and what's up with that? Or they're somewhere nice and they're so in love and they're having such great time somewhere and they're toasting something, and I'm like, and I feel something arising in me. What is that? Is it spirit? Hell no. It's names and forms, right? So this negative vibration, these knots, right? What is this anger and resentment and fear and worry and, oh my gosh. And I always put my stuff out here for you. I always do. Because that's just who I am, and it helps me, it helps me to grow. But what are those negative vibrations about? Where do they come from? I think they come from a couple of things. One is attachment to outcomes. Attachment to outcomes and expectations. Expectations of others, expectations of myself. Tied into outcomes about how people are going to be. Tied into 7th Avenue should be you should be allowed to go through. What's up with that? Detour? Why? Don't you know I have to get there? Don't you know I only have 10 minutes to get there? Don't you know I was late leaving the house? Right? See, so it's an an expectation and an outcome I've placed, right? Second of all, the lens of illusion. This illusion that we're separate. We're not. We consist of the same thing that the stars are consistent of. There's no separateness at all. And the third lens that gets me into these knots, into this anger and resentment, is that I fail to see all of these things that irritate or push my button or the knots as teachers. So the detour was a master, was a teacher that was placed in my path. But more than that even is that each time a knot is tied inside of me because of a person or a place or a situation or a circumstance, it's Dravasa with a mask, prodding me to the end of the story, which is embracing the divine, seeing the divine, visiting with the divine, loving the divine, remembering that I am the divine. Every time a knot happens, every time a situation like this happens, it's a catalyst for me to change. It's a Jesus story. It's an urging to resurrect. And Martha, on the way in, was reminding us about remembering this stuff, like to remember it. And I do remember it. That's good. That's good news. I'm remembering it. But then I'm like, Chris reminded me too in the car. She's reminded me the whole way. Chris was praying. Chris was praying for me to stop, right? Now, Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun, she talks about that when these things happen to us, that it's all good news. It's triggering unresolved issues in us. It's giving us a chance to transform them, to resurrect them, to evolve spiritually. Now, Facebook, detour, little things. Really, little things, not a big deal. So I want to share with you a vulnerable story here about when I was a 15-year-old, I was an adolescent, and my sexuality was incongruent with the expectations of my family. And they threw me out. Pulled me out of high school. I had a great support group of friends. I was very much involved in drama and music, and I loved my teachers, and I loved school. And I loved my family, and I loved God. I used to go to Mass every single morning with my mother at 7 o'clock, and I would word all of the parts of the priests, of the Mass, everything I would say. And then I would go home, and I would do it with my stuffed animals. I would say Mass. So look at what I've created. When they threw me out, I was a homeless youth, for all intents and purposes. Now, fast forward the tape eventually, they're all back in my life. Of course, it was a very short period of time, maybe a few years of angst and shunning and kind of Amishness. Not that they were Amish, but that they really did shun me. And I would go there and I'd ring the bell and they wouldn't let me in, and I would call and they wouldn't answer the phone. And it was just really bad. It was really horrible, really bad injury, right? Hurt me deeply, deeply. And so every time something would happen, anytime, detour, Facebook, of course Facebook didn't exist then, but when little things would happen, it would become big things for me. Because the big thing was the big hurt. I resented all of them for betraying me. So now you gotta go back to the Jesus story. Jesus was betrayed. He wasn't only betrayed, he was arrested, crucified. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. So, in a lot of reflection, it had to come over time for me to get that in order for me to grow spiritually and evolve, I actually had to be the recipient of this injury. That this was a Dravasa story. That it wasn't really my mother and my grandmother and my father. It wasn't. It was Dravasa. And once I realized that this had to happen for my evolution, and I put the resentment and the hurt into the hands of the divine to transform, miraculously, it left me. It left me. And I can give you tons of stories on more things that every time I have a knot or a resentment, when I remember to place it at the feet of Shiva, the divine, Jesus, God, the ascended masters, my guides, whoever it is, when I remember that it's just my willingness to do that, 10% is my willingness, and 90% is divine grace. I always believe that. See, I believe when I'm in willpower, my own power, I'm going to release this resentment. If it kills me, ain't happening. But when I am open and willing and surrender and fall back into the hands of the divine and say, Shiva, Jesus, divine, ascended master, archangels, higher powers, when I place it at the feet of the higher powers, my willingness is the small ingredient, and the larger ingredient is the miracle of divine grace. Now, the Tao Te Ching says, do you think that you can take over the universe and improve it? The universe is sacred. You can't improve it. You can try to change it, but if you do, you'll ruin it. So sometimes things are ahead and sometimes things are behind. And you've heard this in Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season. So there's a need for a detour. Oh, inconveniencing me. But there's a greater picture. The Sikh scriptures and the Hindu scriptures all talk about transforming the anger with love. I can perform no greater act of love for others, no greater act of love of self, no greater devotion to God than when I release the past with all of its resentments. Mostly I have to forgive myself, though, because I'm not there yet. I talk a good game, but there's no shame in my game. I will tell you that I struggle with this on a daily, on a regular. But when I remember to place these things and these struggles at the feet of the divine, magic happens. There's no separateness. When I can learn to stop seeing my world through the obscured lens of expectations and outcomes and separateness, I can be propelled to my highest self instantly, and I can embrace the divine, Durvasa, embracing Vishnu. Then I'm going to be able to access higher frequencies. Because when I'm all in anger, and I'm all in resentment, and I'm all in greed, and I'm all in jealousy, I'm operating at a very low frequency. And then you metaphysicists know that I will attract more of the same. But when I operate at a higher frequency of love and openness and seeing oneness, you know what happens? Oh my God. 7 generations ahead are healed, and 7 generations behind are healed. So you know what it reminds me? It's not all about me.